Hello,
All right.
Chef. Good evening. We're back again. I'm Isaiah, the young Jedi chef, here with the Dragon Warrior chef, German Lamb, and the Phoenix Warrior chef, Noreen. We will be your host for today's podcast. You are listening to a unique podcast where we will discuss tough yet real topics that need to be heard in the industry. In this podcast, you will hear the truth, real, raw, and unfiltered. Today, we have the honor of having an expert in the world of Italian cuisine, Chef Charles, with us to talk about the passion behind every chef to discover what drives and motivates them. I'm excited to get started and jump right in. So without further ado, I will let the star of our show, our chef, our star, Chef Charles, introduce himself. Chef Charles.
Hi, Isaiah. How you doing?
Good.
My name is Charles Draghi. I'm a chef in Boston, Massachusetts. I've been here running and owning restaurants for 30 plus years. Tough town to run restaurants in, but I've done very well here. And I've been classically trained in the beginning, worked in some excellent French restaurants. I've worked in Middle Eastern restaurants. I have a solid foundation in Arabic cuisine, North African cuisine, but mostly my family's from Northern Italy. And so I've done a lot of Italian food, specializing in Piemontese cuisine and wines. I do wine lists also. I've been a sommelier and won awards for my wine lists as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chef. It's definitely an honor to have you here. I love how much you're educated on food and this whole world. So thank you so much for being here with us. So
Absolutely.
definitely as a chef, a chef is someone much more than someone just prepares and cooks food. A chef is a passionate individual that turns simple ingredients into works of art. And our industry is driven around art, passion, love, and technique. All of these areas must be mastered in order to truly become successful in this craft. So, the first question, when did you first fall in love with cooking? How did you discover that this is what you wanted to dedicate your life's work to? Chef, you want to
Well,
start us off?
well, I'm still not sure that I want to dedicate my life to it. I've only been 35 or 40 years into it, so I may change. But I grew up Italian, so we grew up with food. And I grew up cooking and going to farmers markets to some degree, but most of my aunts had huge gardens, raised their own vegetables, and did all their own cooking. Um, and so a love of food really came from that. My father, although he's an attorney, had very little time. He would spend what little time he had traveling to specific markets for specific ingredients and traveling to the shoreline just to get the right steamers that were fresh enough and going to different farms. One farm had the best corn, one had the best tomatoes. And so pretty much all summer long, particularly, but it was always an odyssey to collect the right ingredients for dinner. There's the place that had the right bread. There was another place that had the right cheese. So it became this focal point of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a passionate business. It's not really possible, I don't think, to spend the huge amount of hours and the huge amount of effort that it takes to be successful in the restaurant business and run a restaurant unless you have a passion that drives you to it. Passion is sort of self-regenerating, right? So if you really like food and you really like cooking and you really like entertaining, you'll last about an hour in the restaurant business. It's not about like. There's got to be more than that. And the only thing that can sustain you for, I went over 35 years working 100, 110 hours a week, no days off, no vacations. The only thing that can sustain you with that is a passion that keeps driving you. So you work those long hours, you're pulling an all-nighter doing prep, and you don't think you have anything left in the tank, and you take a 10-minute nap, and you wake up with 5 more ideas and a new energy to drive to make that thing. And not only make it and finish it, whatever your project is, but you've got 5 or 10 new ideas on how to make it better than you started with. And that's the kind of passion that drives you. But it's an art form, right? Like any art form, it takes full-on commitment. I mean, you have to be fully committed to it. And that's what really drives it. Now, All that being said, all of the inspirational passion, drive, romanticism of it is about 10% of the actual business of being in a restaurant and running it successfully. A lot of it is filling out forms and making sure everybody's there and covering for people who are not there. A lot of logistics. There's an awful lot of it that is involved. So it's much more than that. So that's where all those extra hours come in. Creating food and putting out new plates or interesting plates and having happy diners, that's the payoff. That's the part that gives you the endorphin rush. That's the part that you love. But it's a business that fools you, okay? It tricks you. Because I know people who've gotten out of the business and then they're like, oh, I just wish I could work a couple more nights. It's like, you remember the rush, the adrenaline endorphin rush of having that dish that people love. But you forget the 120 hours that went into making that one dish and how much your feet hurt and your back hurts and all that. All of that sacrifice, if you want to call it that, really goes away because the passion keeps you moving. But to be honest with you, 80-90% of being a professional chef and owning a restaurant is crisis management. It's your equipment broke and you've got a giant party and they've just been seated and they've got an 8-course meal and you don't have the equipment to do it correctly. And now you have to fill tubs with ice and ice everything down. Now, how do you perform under those situations? To be honest with you, sometimes that's a bigger payoff in the end because you pulled off the impossible with equipment that wasn't functioning, with half your staff calling in sick because it's flu season and all these things against you, and you're able to execute and people leave saying, wow, that was one of the best meals we've ever had. That was one of the best experiences of my life. So the passion is very important. You cannot do it without the passion. The art is very important because it's why you do it. But sometimes just the logistics of being able to pull it off. I mean, sometimes, and I know this is hyperbole, but sometimes you feel like you won a war, you know, and that's a big payoff too. So you have several different feelings of elation that pay you off for all the huge amounts of sacrifice. And there is a huge amount. I mean, I went decades without ever spending holidays with my family, right? I missed every birthday. I missed every christening, every whatever they invited me to. I don't even remember what it was because I couldn't go because it was always on a Saturday. See, in the restaurant business, you work hardest when everybody else is off. So everything that anybody wants to do is on a Saturday. And no matter how much you say, can you just move it to Sunday? You're still not working. Can we do Sunday? Never. And so you just have to miss out on things. But eventually you get your own place, you have your own menu, and then your family comes to your place to have dinner and you get to host it. And that's the only time you really get to see them. But you get to have them come in and say, wow, you've been doing some good work. Yeah, for 20, 30 years, I've been doing great work. You know?
Yeah, I definitely agree that this industry, the chef is one of the most difficult positions, and it's very rewarding, but it comes with a lot of work, a lot of sacrifice, and oftentimes people don't realize how much goes into it. You know, they see the dish of food, but like you said, chef, hours and hours and hours go into even a simple pickle on the plate, even something so small, hours and hours go into it, and that's what makes this industry so beautiful. But yet, it's just you, like you said, you need to have that drive and that desire and that love for it, and that's
how many hours and hours and effort go into a 3-minute Taylor Swift song, right? And how much she had to sacrifice over the years. Yeah, now she owns the world, but coming up,
you're right.
Easy, you know what I mean?
Not at all.
They only see the finished artifact.
Yeah.
They don't understand. But all of that being said, let me point out one thing. I'm an old guy. I'm old school. That was the way that it used to be done. If you wanted to do a restaurant right, you were never not there. You were there all the time. And every dish you personally saw, and it went out. There were French chefs, master chefs in Michelin star restaurants who, if they weren't sick that day, the restaurant was closed, right? And even, you know, some of the chefs would have a couple of Michelin star restaurants and they would have to travel from one to another on every service. You
Mm.
know, that's old school. It's a new world now. People are starting to talk about things like quality of life and work-life balance. I mean, are you kidding me? 20, 30 years ago, if you talked about work-life balance, they would be like, okay, well, now you take over a second station. How about that for balance? And it's like, well, why don't you not sleep this week? That's balance.
Yeah,
It's a different world out there. And to be honest with you, I've always tried to make life easier. And I always paid my cooks really well. Whenever we got real busy, I would just line up my cooks and say, listen, we really need 2 more people. Or I can give that money to you and we all work harder, And then what happened was I would make accommodations. So I would work stations so people could have 2 days off with their family together. And, you make those concessions, but it was easier for me because I wasn't a corporate guy. I owned a very busy restaurant, but I was there every day. So half of my line cooks were young women, and some of them decided to have children. And long before there was any kind of, laws on it or whatever, if they would take 3 months off to have a child, I would just pay them as if they were showing up every day. I would keep paying them, and then I would work their station because I'm already there. I already have a station, but my station was the finesse station, right? I would do all of the real complicated appetizers, amuse-bouche, things like that, desserts, anything that required a real high level of proficiency. But I could also jump on pasta station. I could jump on fish station. And it wasn't just being magnanimous. It was the people that were with me a long time. That was my family, and those were my folks.
Yeah, you see them more than your actual family. Like, you're with them 20.
Well, you do see them more than your family. And they, in some ways, they cover you. There was a time several years ago where I broke my ankle and I had to be out for a few months. And I didn't think it was possible to be out for a few months from a restaurant. But these cooks who had been with me for years, a couple of cooks had been with me through 3 different restaurants, 15 years. They're like, don't worry, chef, we got it. Now, that didn't mean that I wasn't on the phone to them all day long. And I was placing all the orders and I would constantly be checking in. But they executed the way that it would have been executed if I was there. They knew what I wanted. They knew what the customers were expecting. And when I got back, regulars were like, we didn't even know you were gone because the food was just as good.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that tells you that you did a good job in training your staff and developing a system,
Well, yes, but it was also self-serving, right? Because I always wanted to get to the point where I was just a figurehead, like Colonel Sanders, right? I didn't want to have to actually be there making the chicken, right? I wanted my picture on it and then to collect checks, So, but it's also as you develop and collect a certain amount of technique and knowledge in the business, I always say that every technique you learn is like an arrow that you put in the quiver. You learn and you put another arrow in your quiver. And when the final battle comes between you and other restaurants, the guy with the last arrow wins. The more you know, the better. Well, there's also a point where you're like, I got a lot of arrows. I need to share some of these with the rest of the tribe. You know what I mean? And you see those young, eager people come in and they want to learn. And it's a rush to teach them stuff because it's like any teacher. A young person with limited life experience comes in, wants to learn, and you tell them something that's very simple to you, but they look at you like you're a genius. Well, that's a big ego stroke, right? Oh, I'm a genius because I told you how to properly cook vegetables. I'll take that. Okay, I'm a god now. But then what happens is they get less and less impressed, so you have to keep upping the ante.
Yeah, the simple stuff intrigues us, chef.
But I love teaching. I love it. It's at least as rewarding for me as cooking, because the cooking thing, I love cooking and creating. I've always done things differently, right? I've always been kind of on a whole different island. So the way that 99.9% of chefs are trained to cook with a certain approach to food and certain basic, I kind of sometimes do the opposite. I'm like on a different island. I was known for cooking 100% without butter. It wasn't I have anything. I put it on my toast in the morning, but the abusive amounts of butter that's used in a lot of restaurant cooking, people don't know. They don't know if you get a bowl of mussels and broth that there might be a quarter or half a pound of butter in that. It doesn't look like it. And then they get the food hangover afterwards. Like, why do I feel bloated and indigestive? So I found as I got further and further away from using butter, that the food tasted better. Because butter, chefs will always say butter adds flavor to an extent, but first it flattens flavor. And then in order to get the flavor of your ingredients back, you have to add 5 to 10 times the amount of salt to get the flavor back up over the platform of the butter. And so I found that those things, now, when I tell other chefs that I'm cooking without butter, it's heresy. And they're like, that's not even possible. That's not, you can't do that. I'm like, well, I'm an Italian chef. We don't really use butter.
Exactly. Yeah.
Everybody goes to Italian restaurants, and why? Because they love the flavor of the food, and there's no butter in it.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, it's the flavor. If you know how to cook, a true chef, if you know how to cook without butter, that's pretty impressive.
Listen, simple. You get the best ingredients you can.
Exactly. Yeah.
Flavorful ingredients, and then you get it away.
Exactly.
So you do simple technique, but if you buy beautiful, organic, locally grown carrots right out of the ground, they're going to be so flavorful. You'll taste the sweetness of the earth in them. Like, what am I going to do now? Cover them with a heavy sauce?
Exactly.
No.
Exactly. Yeah, you're taking away the trueness of the ingredient. The less you cook it, the less you touch it, the better it is, because it already has all that natural flavor, all that natural, like you said, all that nutrients, and when you cook it and overcook it, it takes it away. So it's kind of,
whether you believe in God or nature or whatever, Mother Earth or whatever it is, something that has better technique than you already put enough flavor in there.
Exactly.
And what you want to do is just reveal it.
Exactly.
The way I always cook is I find what is my central ingredient, whether it's, say, a piece of bass or a veal chop or whatever I'm using. Now, how do I reveal more of itself? Not how do I cover it? Not how do I make a sauce that, some crazy over-the-top sauce where you're really tasting the sauce and then the protein or the vegetable is lost as a platform. But how do I reveal more of itself? How do I make that zucchini taste more like zucchini?
Exactly. Yeah, that's a good point. I never thought of it from that perspective, but because, like you said, a lot of the sauces, they cover up, but it's supposed to complement, not cover up.
Well, that's why they call it not paying, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. That was so true, Chef. Noreen, Chef Lim, do you have anything to add to that?
Absolutely. Chef, just hearing you talk about the vegetables and then going away from the use of butter and extra salt and all of, I feel like you're speaking to my soul, because it's something that I observed in food, especially in the American food scene, for a long time. And it's my passion for why I came into the food industry. I did time in healthcare and just watching how we eat and what's on the shelves. And I talk about this all the time because for me that's my passion, is coming in with the new world of cooking and seeing how can we create a space for better living, better food, but simple, because simple is the way to go. And just listening to you talk about that was like, wow, this is my passion, that. And it's like you said, the 10%, 20% of what you go through every day, and the rest of it is putting your head down and working, just doing the work. But
inspiration, 90% perspiration, right?
Exactly. But without that 10% inspiration, the perspiration is just going to be, it's going to feel like draining. You're stressed and you feel aimless and you don't know where your path is. And I like to use the metaphor a lot with my friends. You're the captain of the ship of your life. So if you don't know where you're steering, it can be a very arduous journey. But if you know where you're going and you have your eye on that map, the journey is going to be worth it. So I think finding that compass of that passion is super important, and I love to hear about it.
Yeah, it's so important, Noreen, like you said, knowing why you're doing it, and then the second part of it is actually, like you said, doing it and making it happen. Super, super important. Chef Lam, you want to add your piece to it?
Well, you know what, Chef Charles, listening to you And the first thing you talked about was old school. Well, I'm old school, and I always say old school beat new school. Why? Because there's a certain foundation and core values that was taught, and it was hard, but it wasn't hard. It was the right approach. So for me, food, I love food. Passion is there, but then I realized you need something more than that. And I call it discipline and structure. And when you
Mm,
have that, you slow everything down because in our industry, it's so fast. You taste things and it comes and it goes. So for you to kind of get 35 years of experience in 1 year, is it impossible? Yeah, but you could kind of micro it and slow everything down. And that's where you have to add your philosophy and principle. So for me, by having discipline structure at an early stage, going into the industry, it helped me absorb, understand, and the chef will go, wow, you got it? Yeah, I got it. Because they didn't realize it wasn't the food that was so beautiful or the taste or the technique. Is my inner core. I had the discipline structure where I'm just in the moment and he sees you that you're in the present. And that is something that it's hard to teach if that person doesn't have discipline structure. Then you got to start putting guardrails. And that's what cooking is, right? Cooking, as we cook, we learn each time from a new flavor, from a new treasure. So for me, it's like really enjoy the moment.
Yeah, that's like so important as to what you said. Enjoy the moment and kind of make it your own. I believe Chef got cut off from the call uh slightly. Trying to add him back in right now. Uh,
okay.
1 second.
Yeah,
One.
discipline and structure is something I think a lot of us struggle with. It's something I've heard like as an extern now going through different kitchens and learning. I hear that from a lot of people in leadership roles. Like you got to stay hungry. You got to be here to learn, listen, and all of that. Open yourself up to learning new things. And they have trouble with a lot of younger people coming into the industry not having that courage to do the discipline and be there present, but can really take us far and something I'm practicing a lot more now. So always good to learn about that. Structure is the key.
For sure. You're back, Chef.
I'm
Welcome
back.
back,
I don't know
Chef.
why I got cut off. Something happened.
No worries. Thank you so much, Chef. All right. So yeah, again, this like you said, it's super important to have that drive, have that focus, and then at the end of the day, have that passion. And along with the dedication, the long hours and everything it takes to be in this industry and to be a chef, we might strive for perfection, and we do strive for perfection. We strive to put our best foot forward and give it everything we have. But unfortunately, sometimes as much as we do that and as much as we want to do that, we might not be successful. There's always going to be someone that might not like our food, might not like what we're doing. And it's important to take that criticism and that feedback just as it is to accept positive feedback. So I think it's a good balance. You need to have the good and the bad. So what's the best way to kind of like bounce back from negative feedback or negative criticism, and how should you handle that?
Keep cooking. Just keep cooking and don't pay any attention to it. Because the thing is, there's always going to be somebody who's going to criticize. There's always going to be somebody who doesn't like it. I'm not going to mention names, but I've always done really, really well with all of the Boston food critics except one. And he seems to have a personal thing. And I don't know what it is. Never ran across them that, except, here or there. I never had a, crossword with him or anything. And he used to, at the farmer's market, some farmers used to grow special crops for me, including herbs. And he would go to the farmer's market and he would try to take half of my herbs. And the farmers would call me. I'm like, just let him have them. And he came by this restaurant that I used to run in the North End, and we baked our own bread every day, like 4 or 5 different kinds of bread. And he would come in on his way to work. He was an editor, and he would just grab a loaf of bread and walk out. And my pastry guy in the morning would say, "What do you want me to do?" I said, "Bake more bread." Like, what am I going to do? And also, that's his opinion. It's fine. But the thing is, and this is what I want to, I was going to say before I got cut out, back to her point earlier. The thing is, when you're cooking, it's like any other art form. You just cook and you cook and you cook. Musicians call it woodshedding. You just keep doing it. You're doing it. And then, like any art form, there's going to be a point where you break through a wall. And on the other side is going to be your voice. And when you find your voice, and we were talking about the long hours and all that, and finding direction. She was talking about finding direction and focus. That will never be a problem again. Never. You will never not have drive. You will never not have laser beam focus once you find your voice. Mm-hmm. And in the meantime, you're going to be derivative. You're going to be cooking things that you've seen somewhere else. You're going to love somebody. Michel Gerrard was a huge hero for me, right? Just recently passed away. Roger Vergier. I mean, some of these people were huge heroes. And I would cook and try to do things in that style. When I was in my early 20s, I was working at a place called L'Américaine. I was in a garde-manger department, which was a real garde-manger, very active. Lots of charcuterie, crepinettes, ballantines, galantines, all that. Smoked meats, all that. And I was constantly creating things, but they were all based on things I was reading, tons of books. Those were things we used to have before you could go online. And I would, really pound the books, and I would come up with ideas. And they were my ideas, but they were based on other things. And I could point to things and say, well, this is kind of like something Michel Gerrard would do. But over time, you find what works for you, like the no butter thing, right? Also, I would like to point out, secondary seasoning is BS. You don't sprinkle salt on top of something that's already seasoned and think it's going to be a good product at the end. Chefs, but customers are like, why is it so damn salty and only on top? So it was an idea that started a long time ago in New York. It was a good idea. You roast a piece of meat perfectly, you slice it, you sprinkle a little salt on top. It brings the juice to the top, which mixes with the salt, which gives you a brighter, more intense flavor. It never worked. And chefs all over the world are still dumping salt all over stuff. So I found my voice, which was don't dump salt, don't use abusive amounts of butter, get the best ingredients, and get out of their way. Well, once that became my focus, I was elated to go to every market and plant. I have a big herb garden, plant everything I could to find new ingredients and be excited by it. The excitement never wanes after that. Once you find your voice. Now, until then, you can be excited and you can have the energy and but you're learning, right?
Yes.
So you're learning and you're gathering and you're gathering and you're gathering. But the art is not in the gathering. The art is in the editing. And as you throw away those things that was a good technique, but it doesn't work for me. And as you strip down more and more, that's where you find yourself. And once you find yourself, God help your family, because you will work 24/7. You're never going back again. It's all those things that, they talk about painters or sculptors who just live in their studios. Well, you'll live in your kitchen. That's your studio. The chemistry set cooking thing is not my thing. I didn't grow up with it. I understand that approach, but it's not for me. When I came up through the ranks, using emulsifiers and preservatives and things like that, chemicals in the cooking, was what we were against. We saw ourselves as paladins fighting against General Mills and General Foods, the big corporate entities that used things like guar gum and xanthan and all that. Well, people found creative ways to use that, and that became their voice, right? And so it's a different thing. That's not my voice. That's their voice. And so I do my thing. But once you do your thing, as James Brown says, I just got to get up and do my thing. You just don't stop. So that's where your drive and your determination comes from. And once you're in that track, people booing you from the sidelines, your train's running too fast to even listen. They don't care about that. Like I got a station to get to, and then there's another station and another station. You can boo from the tracks all you want, but I've already passed you. I've already passed you.
I love that, Chef. Yeah, I love that. Find your voice, and kind of like you said, I agree. Like a lot of people that are outside of the industry don't understand, even my parents, oh, why are you so many hours at work? Why are you, always, but it's like, once you find your voice, once you find what you love to do, and once you put your spin on it, like nobody could stop you. And that's well, a lot of people outside of the industry, they don't understand that. And they, like you said, they could say stuff from the sidelines, but they're not putting in the work, and they're not, doing their thing, and you're already way above them. So I love that perspective, Chef.
When I started, cooking was seen as an art form. Okay, well, okay, so I should qualify that. Cooking was something that you got into if you were incorrigible. You had three choices. You could join the Navy, go to prison, or become a cook. That's why all three have tattoos, right? So you can move one to the other, right? But beyond that, people who did cook saw it as an art form. And so what happened was, you could, if somebody found their voice, became an artist, you could sit in a plain room at a plain table, and somebody put a plate of food in front of you, and you could say, that's the 12 Road Brothers. You're like, I know who that is. That's Joël Robuchon. You could see who it is on the plate. And then several years ago, cooking went, for a lot of people, went to a craft, which is not a bad thing. Arts and crafts are great. Making beautiful furniture is a craft, but it has utilitarian purpose. And so a lot of people got back into old style charcuterie making sausages, making their own prosciutto, brewing their own beer and all that. So you could sit there and go, this is a really good pate. I don't know who made it, and so it went that direction. So now I kind of had a leg in both camps. I used to get whole animals and butcher them and make my own charcuterie. And I used to teach at CIA in between the trimesters, charcuterie seminars, I guess you call it.
Awesome.
Yeah, but it was fun because I got to eat in one of their restaurants for free, and I got to make a lot of pate, and we all ate pate. It was like a party. It was awesome.
Pate party, I love it.
Yeah, but so there's different avenues now. So I kind of like, I understand the art form, and so you find your own voice in art, but you can find your own voice in the craft of it too, right? You can be that person who really makes unbelievable bratwurst and have a restaurant based on great bratwurst, great charcuterie. Now, those are not indicative, iconic dishes of your style necessarily, but you're doing a really good job with it, and it's a lot of fun. Who wouldn't like a restaurant where you make tons of sausages and sauerkraut and have beer with it? I mean, it's delicious.
Yes, I would be there in an instant, Chef.
Yeah, but it's all about art, and then it became all about craft, and now you can. So it just opens up more avenues.
It does.
So, Noreen, did you grow up in a family that was sort of food centric, where food was important to you?
Absolutely. Yeah. Food my family's from Egypt, and I know you're familiar with Middle Eastern and like North African cuisine, and like I'm sure the culture that goes with it, but food is a representation of love and care for us. So, yeah, exactly. So my mom, she cooked for us all the time. She still does. My grandmother, I was learning from them in the kitchen mostly. My dad's a pretty good cook too. So for us, it was Sundays, especially, we would all gather in the kitchen and we were cooking together and trying new recipes, doing different things. And that was very, important bonding moment for us. But food was, and to this day, still very important. Dinner time at the table together, very sacred.
You don't have to come from a background of food, but it helps. It really helps. You come from a culture that values and puts emphasis on food. Now, I have a very good friend of mine, and he grew up in a just French's mustard, ketchup on the table, hot dog family. Grilled cheese sandwich was Wonder Bread and Kraft singles. And he makes Italian food better than most Italians. He's amazing. But it took him longer to learn, to train, because you already have a leg up. If you already have that appreciation for food, you've already developed a palate by the time you're a kid, then take that with you. I know German did. German has always had a great palate, for food, and he's appreciated other foods, not just what he was raised with. He got into classical French cuisine, and he worked in those tough places in hotels where they yell at you all. But it does help. It does help if you have an acculturated palate by the time you hit the point where you want to make it a career.
Right.
Yeah, definitely helps. Chef Lem, you wanna add to that?
Well, you know what? First of all, I just want to thank Chef Charles for his schedule and time and sharing his, anecdotes during his journey. Yeah, it's a different era, and in one way, this is pretty good because you're hearing it from from a warrior. So to me, it's more of, he mentioned passion, but it's teaching. So then you have to have a purpose, but then you have to find your voice. So our profession right now, it's beautiful, absolutely. Do you want balance of family and life? Sure, but you have to have that discipline structure going into it. And when you going into it, you'll find your balance. So I just want to say again, thank you, Chef.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chef. We have about a minute left in the call before it ends. Anything else, Chef? Last minute piece of advice that you have for anybody aspiring to be a chef or it kind of wants to follow in your footsteps?
Think about accounting or law. Those are good. You'll get a couple of vacations. But if you can't, medicine's good too. Medicine's excellent, but they do work long hours. But if you can't and you have to cook and you feel it, then just do it and do it all the time. And don't take no for an answer. And the thing is, once you feel like you have, you really, you know it when it happens. It's like love. You know it when it happens. A lot of times you think you're in love. Maybe I'm in love. I should be in love at this point. No, you know when it happens. And you know when you're ready. The important thing for young chefs is don't step out until you're ready to really put your name on it. Not on the restaurant, to put your name on the world. And that is very important because you can step out early and you cheat yourself of more learning experiences, of more, not just cooking, but learning experiences in terms of how to run a business, how to do the accounting, how to do payroll, how to look